Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Shropshire County Pension Fund. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view the meeting using the link on the agenda. Just before we move to the first item on the agenda, I just want to give you a quick update on membership. Carolyn Healy, one of the members of Telford and Wrekin, has stepped down from being a committee member, and I've written and thanked Carolyn very much for her service. Telford and Wrekin Council have proposed that councillors Zona Hannington and Paul Davis be appointed to the committee, with councillors Fiona Doran and Stephen Reynolds acting as their substitutes. However, as this technically has not been formally confirmed until Telford and Wrekin's cabinet meeting on Thursday the 19th September, they're technically and formally actually not yet members of the committee, although we're very pleased to welcome them both here today. They will be participating fully in our discussions, but they won't be able to actually vote at today's meeting. So you're both very welcome and pleased to see you.
Thank you, Chair.
Legal advice was sought on all this, and I'm happy to go along with that advice. So, morning, Roger. Moving on, therefore, to the first item, apologies and substitutions. We have no apologies received. Now, the appointment of vice chairman, what I'm proposing to do is actually to defer that until the next meeting, because it has always been a case on this committee that the chair is from one authority and the vice chair is from the other. As Shropshire Council are currently in the chair, the appointment of vice chair will be from Telford and Wrekin. And once you're fully fledged members of the committee, at the next meeting, I propose that we actually deal with that item then. Okay. Are there any members, item 3, any disclosable interests? No. In that case, we'll move on to item 4, minutes of previous meeting, which you've all received for the meeting held on the 21st of June. Everybody happy with the minutes? Yep, okay, thank you very much. And we will now move on to item 5, public questions. I believe you've all had copies emailed to yourselves. Yep. Now we have 4 public questions. None of our questioners are present. So Peter Chatterton, Pensions, Investment and Responsible Investment Manager, will read out the questions, and Justin Bridges, Head of Pensions, will read out the responses. So the first question is from Dr. Jamie Russell. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, first question from Dr. Jamie Russell is, the Shropshire Pension Fund invests in Glencore, the world's largest exporter of thermal coal. In August, Glencore announced that it was abandoning plans to spin off its coal business and continue to invest in polluting coal against the advice of the UN IPCC, the International Energy Agency, and leading climate scientists. Meanwhile, Glencore's updated Climate Action Transition Plan abandons the Paris-aligned pathway stating our targets are not aligned with the IEA's net zero emissions scenarios. The company also uses inflated baseline to measure its progress against emission reduction targets. For example, Glencore is already measuring a 22% emissions decrease from its baseline, despite increasing coal output in 2023. This means that only expecting to achieve a 3% emissions reduction between now and 2030. The 2030 target is 25%. It has also dropped its coal production cap and introduced a new 2030 emissions target, which is less ambitious than its previous one. Effectively, Glencore has said that it's not intending to decarbonise in line with the landmark Paris Agreement. Is the fund happy to invest in companies that are ignoring the Paris Agreement? And if so, how does this impact Shropshire Council's climate emergency declaration?
Thank you. And the response, please, Justin.
Thank you, Chair. The response is the fund's strategy is centred on active ownership rather than divestment. Remaining invested in Glencore allows investors to engage with the company using the influence of shareholders to advocate for stronger climate action. The aim is to push Glencore towards adopting more ambitious targets, greater transparency and a clearer alignment with the goals of the Paris Agreement. As part of our pool's participation with Climate Action 100+, LGPS Central and the fund's investment managers and stewardship providers engage directly with Glencore to encourage them to set more robust Paris-aligned targets and improve their climate strategy. Additionally, Glencore's decision not to spin off its coal assets means that these remain with a company with which we are actively engaged. This allows investors to continue to influence Glencore's management and climate strategy directly, rather than having the assets managed by a separate entity with potentially less transparency and engagement opportunities. In contrast, other miners such as BHP and Anglo American have pursued asset disposal strategies to meet emissions targets, meaning that they lose control of how these assets are run and what emissions pathway they are aligned with, rather than committing to a responsible and managed exit from existing thermal coal operations. Glencore's Climate Action Transition Pathway lays out the company's plan to phase out thermal coal gradually, which is a step in the right direction. We note that the company's emissions targets place it under the International Energy Agency's announced pledges scenario, which it considers more realistic than net zero emissions. However, investors expect more accelerated action and are continuously engaging with Glencore to update their climate action transition pathway to incorporate new assets, such as those from Elk Valley Resources. We acknowledge that there are questions around Glencore's choice of baseline year and the removal of production cap. While we do engage on these topics, an updated climate action transition plan with more ambitious targets, along with the company's adherence to such targets, would go a long way to allay fears over these issues. Elk Valley Resources focuses on metallurgical coal, which is essential for processing transition metals critical to the green energy transition. By advocating for such updates, the aim is to align Glencore's strategy with more sustainable pathways. It is important to highlight that Glencore also plays a critical role in the supply of key metals essential for the transition to a low-carbon economy. These include cobalt, copper, and nickel, which are vital for the production of renewable energy technologies, electric vehicles, and battery storage. The fund's investment in Glencore supports this broader transition strategy. Additionally, Elk Valley Resources focus on metallurgical coal, which is imperative for processing these transition metals, aligns with our belief in a managed, responsible transition. We are closely monitoring Glencore's integration of Elk Valley Resources assets into their climate action transition plan, and will advocate for alignment with ambitious emissions reduction targets. This approach ensures that any short-term gains from thermal coal are reinvested in greener sectors, thereby facilitating a more responsible transition. Glencore has also committed to providing detailed climate-related disclosures in line with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures guidelines. We see their transparency and willingness to engage in dialogue with investors as a positive step. Through our engagement, we aim to influence Glencore's future climate strategies, ensuring that they move towards more robust Paris-aligned targets. We expect Glencore to update their climate action transition plan to incorporate the assets and activities of Elk Valley Resources, which will provide a clearer and more comprehensive pathway towards reducing carbon emissions, while supporting the global transition to cleaner energy. This is in line with the pension fund's own climate strategy approved at Pensions Committee.
Thank you. And the next question 2, is from Mrs. Chris Welsh.
Thank you again, Chair. Question is, in 2020, Shropshire councillors voted to divest £2 billion in pension funds from fossil fuels. However, the Pensions Fund Committee voted to ignore this request. Since then, the fund has remained invested in major fossil fuel companies, including BP and Shell, using the argument that engagement with these companies is more effective than divestment. In August 2024, scientists made the landmark announcement that the 1.5-degree climate target agreed at Paris is now essentially impossible due to our failure to curb emissions quickly enough. And that's from the best case scenario for climate change is now 1.6 degrees of warming from the New Scientist, which was issued in August 2024. Therefore, will the fund apologise for its part in not responding to the climate emergency declared by Shropshire Council in time to keep 1.5 degrees C alive?
Thank you. And the response, please, Justice.
As responsible investors, the fund shall deploy all stewardship tools at its disposal to achieve its climate change strategy. Our approach encompasses stewardship activities such as engagement and voting. The fund also engages with our external managers to ensure that they remain invested in companies which share our responsible investment commitments and with regulators to finance and advance towards a low carbon economy. The fund recognises the critical need to prevent further climate change and the need for an orderly decarbonisation of the real economy to protect the value of our investments from the risks associated with a warming climate. However, we do not consider that the exclusion of fossil fuels from our holdings would have been the appropriate response to these risks, nor do we believe that this response would be effective at preventing further climate change. Conversely, we believe by divesting from high-emitting companies, we would be forfeiting our ability to influence these companies while providing an opportunity for less climate-conscious investors to purchase these assets, investors who may be more interested in the short-term financial returns rather than the long-term benefits of a transition economy. We believe divesting from these companies acts counterintuitively to our interests of pursuing an orderly transition. The transition to a low-carbon economy presents opportunities as well as risks, and fossil fuel companies can benefit from and contribute to this transition. We recognise the need to continue engagement and the need to advocate for greater ambition to realise an orderly transition. However, we acknowledge the action already taken by companies and consider that responsible investors have played a significant role in encouraging this change and promoting longer-term thinking amongst corporate management. Both Shell and BP are positioned to benefit from several opportunities associated with the transition, such as developing low-carbon solutions, including renewables and hydrogen. Both companies have made notable efforts to expand their business operations in areas such as solar, wind, and hydrogen. Both companies are also investing in carbon capture and storage, which could make an important contribution to the achievement of net zero ambitions. Both companies have targets and strategies in place to meet net zero. We are cognizant that progress needs to be accelerated. We note that their approach to climate change is more advanced than many of their peers, whose shares are held by less climate-conscious investors. In our 2023 TCFD report on our website, the fund demonstrated a positive reduction towards net zero, as finance and emissions Scope 1 and 2 associated with the fund's equity portfolio were approximately 46% lower than in 2020, which strongly suggests that the fund is progressing towards the achievement of its net zero ambition by 2050 or before.
Thank you. And the third question, please, from Mr. Paul Cooper.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Cooper's question is, as a Shropshire County Pension Fund member, I'm alarmed at the acceleration of the climate breakdown and the growing impact of its effects on people and the planet year after year. 2024 is on track to be the hottest in human history. The Shropshire County Pension Fund continues to invest in fossil fuel resources, the production and use which is largely to blame for our climate-induced food, water and forced migration crises we are witnessing in the Earth's hotter countries. Without doubt, these crises will spread across the globe, risking the lives of our children and our grandchildren, yours and mine. Fund members would like a public vote on divesting from fossil fuel companies. Can you tell us when members will be given a say? I note that there's been no AGM since 2020.
And the response, please.
Shropshire County Pension Fund keeps its investment strategy under constant review, as in recent years moved its UK investments into global sustainable products, moved its passive funds into low carbon index, and committed the increased allocation to equities agreed in June 2023 into sustainable equities. This has resulted in a decrease in the fund's finance emissions figures of 46% as of December 2023 since 2020. And means that 70% of the fund's equities are invested in low carbon and sustainable investments. The fund's climate stewardship plan also reflects these changes, with the fund's top 10 emitters coming from a cross-section of sectors from technology to energy, showing the importance of taking a view at the whole economy level and not just concentrating on specific sectors. The fund delegates responsibility for individual stock selection to investment managers, provided they meet the overall aims of the fund and its ambition to be net zero by 2050. Whilst climate continues to see the most attention, the fund requires all its investment managers to monitor all environmental, social and governance risks within the portfolio. Individual members of the Shropshire Pension Fund do not make investment decisions on the fund's behalf. This is a responsibility of specialist investment managers in accordance with LGPS investment regulations. The fund's approach to delivering the content of the AGM was agreed at committee in June 23 and is detailed in our communication strategy on our website. Whilst we have a number of different communication channels to raise issues, we've only received a handful of requests for either an AGM or to divest from fossil fuels out of the total fund membership of over 53,000 members. We will continue to keep this position under review and monitor the views of all stakeholders.
Thank you. And finally, question from Ms. Joanna Blackman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Blackman's question is, earlier this year, Shell published its latest energy transition strategy, which included abandoning a key climate target for 2035 and weakening another goal for 2030. The oil major updated its previous target to make a 20% cut between 2016 and 2030 in the total net carbon intensity of all energy products it sells to customers. This target has now been reduced to between 15 and 20%. Within Shell's strategy, Chief Executive Wales Farwan writes that the change reflects a strategic shift to focus less on selling electricity, including renewable power. Instead, the company says investment in oil and gas will be needed due to sustained demand for fossil fuels. It emphasises the importance of liquefied natural gas as a critical component of the energy transition and says it will grow its LNG business by up to 30% by 2030. This amounts to a bet against the world meeting its climate goals, but the International Energy Agency and others conclude that no new oil and gas investment is needed on a pathway to 1.5 degrees C, and warning against the risk of overinvestment. Elsewhere in the report, Shell notes that it has chosen to retire its 2035 target of a 45% reduction in net carbon intensity due to uncertainty in the pace of change of the energy transition. What are the committee's views on this, and how has the committee challenged Shell's backtracking through its policy of engagement?
Thank you. And the response, please, Justin.
Shell is a large contributor to our finance emissions and therefore very closely monitored. The fund regularly engages with the company through our external stewardship providers and external investment managers. These engagements are driven by our belief that companies which are aligned with the Paris Agreement are more likely to be able to deliver sustainable long-term returns. Beyond the downside risk associated with climate change, oil and gas companies are also positioned to benefit from the opportunities associated with the energy transition and have the expertise and capital required to support the low transition economy. They are also investors in low carbon solutions such as hydrogen power and carbon capture and storage. While these technologies are yet to be proven at scale, almost all net zero scenarios, including the International Energy Agency's net zero by 2050 scenario, assume the adoption of these technologies. Despite the recent target adjustments, the company is decarbonising faster than its peers, and notably adopted an absolute Scope 3 emission target for oil products. Shell's carbon intensity is 56% lower than the sector average, and Shell has cut its absolute Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 31% since 2016. Although these can be seen as positive actions, we believe further disclosures and clarifications should be sought. We are therefore seeking clarification on why non-oil products are not included in a new Scope 3 target. In addition, we are seeking clarification on alignment between the company's CapEx strategy and net zero targets. This encompasses Shell's long-term plans regarding gas production. We did not support Shell's energy transition strategy at the 2024 AGM and reached out to our external managers to ensure these considerations were also incorporated in their voting. As you might be aware, the Resolution Energy Transition Strategy, Resolution 22, attracted 22% voting dissent from investors. The company acknowledged that the level of votes on Resolution 22 requires them to explain what actions they intend to take to consult shareholders in order to understand the reasons behind the result and report back within 6 months. We are in the cohort of investors which are currently engaged in the Shell to seek clarity on the company's new net zero strategy. LGPS Central are scheduled to meet with the representative of the company in this quarter. LGPS Central believe their previous engagements, along with like-minded investors and organisations, e.g. Institutional Investors Group on climate change, have positively shaped the advancements in the company's climate strategy.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll now move on to the next three items, items 6, 7 and 8, which I propose to take all as one block because we're covering very similar ground. We've got recommendations in paper 6 and we've got recommendations for paper 8, and I'll come back to those and tie everything together at the end of the presentations and after we've had the discussion. So I'd like to move on to, first of all, the internal audit outturn report for Shropshire County Pension Fund 23-24. And Adam Williams, who's with us virtually today, will take us through this particular report. So welcome, and over to you, please, Adam.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Adam Williams. I'm the Principal Auditor for Shropshire Council, and I'll be overseeing the audit plan for the pension fund for 24-25, and I'll be presenting the internal audit outturn report this morning. If you do have any questions, I will endeavour to answer them during the meeting. However, if there are any points that require further clarification from the internal audit team, I will make a note of your comments and get back to you. Turning to our report, this is the annual report we provide to the Pensions Committee, summarising our work for the 23-24 audit plan and our opinion on the fund's overall control environment. Point 3 on the report, your agenda page 8, we ask that the committee considers and endorses the performance against the plan for the year ended 31st of March, as well as the annual opinion on the pension fund's internal control environment for 23-24. I will now run through the key points of the report that I would like to draw to the committee's attention. Turning to your agenda page 11, I can confirm that based on the work we undertook in 23-24, that the pension fund's governance, risk management and control processes are sound and working effectively, and therefore we are able to offer a substantial opinion. Members should note that this is the highest opinion we can offer on the effectiveness of controls reviewed and should be seen as sort of a positive good news item. On agenda page 12, the opinion we have delivered is based on a total of 6 assurance reviews in 23-24, covering corporate governance, risk management, pension fund monitoring, investment managers' internal control reports, pension administration and the Altair application. All audits undertaken have received a positive good opinion, with no change in direction from the previous reviews we've undertaken in those areas. Turning to agenda page 13, the top table summarises the recommendations raised during the work we've completed. It's important to note that we raised no significant or fundamental recommendations during our work. A total of 10 requires attention recommendations have been raised as part of our reviews, and these relate to minor weaknesses or housekeeping issues for management to resolve. And the table summarises that 1 recommendation was raised in pension fund monitoring, 6 pensions in administration, and 3 regarding the Altair application. More information is provided on each of these audits as part of the Appendix A, which covers the controls we've reviewed during the audits. And finally, I just want to draw to the committee's attention the feedback we have received from management regarding the audits we've undertaken. We've received 5 survey forms back as part of our reviews, which have all been scored positively. Thank you for the time. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, all I can say is that it's a very, very good opinion. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's good all the way through. Brian.
Yes, it's certainly an excellent report. It almost gives the impression in para 717 that all 10 of the recommendations rated were rated as requires attention. It's almost a contradiction in terms there. But I want to ask, have those minor recommendations now been addressed?
Yeah, who'd like to answer?
Okay. I'm happy to say that. I mean, as part of our reviews for the following year, we do follow up recommendations each year to see what action has been taken. Obviously, management may be able to provide a more up-to-date picture at this current point in time.
So from the investment side, yes, we've accepted all the recommendations that have been raised in the audits. We're in the process. Some of them are longer term things. So some of them relate to things like having adequate procedure notes in place. So it's a case of, we're quite a small team. There's only 3 of us within the investment side, and it's making sure that obviously we don't just rely on that knowledge within the team. We actually have it documented down. So it's a case of actually getting those actually up to date. So whilst we have basic things like procedure notes in place, it's just making sure those are kept up to date over time. So there's a lot of these things that will be ongoing recommendations. Don't know what about in terms of the ones on the administration side.
So in terms of the administration, as Adam said, it was a lot to do with some housekeeping that just needed to be updated. Again, procedure notes, making sure that we're reviewing those regularly and updating our review process and the dates for which we had reviewed our processes. Also, some of the things where we deal with hundreds of cases and we maybe missed something on one case. So it's just a reminder out to the team to make sure that they're obviously paying attention to everything that we're doing. But yeah, we've got actions raised for each one. We've got set dates to make sure that we're achieving that.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
I'm very happy with the report. I'm happy to move it.
We'll do it at the end of the 3 sections, I think, Brian, and we'll pull everything back together. Okay, well, we'll move on to the external audit now, and the audit findings for Shropshire Council's Pension Fund 23-24, and we've got Grant Patterson and Mary Wren with us today in person from Grant Thornton. So over to you both.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm Grant Patterson, I'm the engagement lead for the audit. I'm actually going to pass over to Mary to take you through the report itself. But overall, I think we will be sort of consistent with what internal audit is saying, that our work was also not identifying any significant issues. But I'll hand over to Mary now. She'll take you through the report and then we'll take the questions after that.
Thank you, Grant. So as Grant said, the audit has progressed smoothly. So at this point, I'd really like to pass on my thanks to the pensions finance team. But there are a few points outstanding, but this report is written at a point in time. So what I'll do, I'll provide an update to this report, but also just focus on really the key items within that report as well. So if I could just take you to page 6 of this report, which is page 26 of the pack. There is a page which has traffic lights, and as this report was written and sent on the 4th of September, this has significantly moved on. So most of the points which were outstanding at that stage are now complete. There are points which we would not generally finalise until the audit opinion is ready to be issued, and that involves areas such as subsequent events and the letter of representation. So at this stage, the majority of that work is now complete. We do have a small amount of work to carry out on derivative investment for one particular item, but that is with the audit team finalised. If I could just take you through to the work we carry out in our significant risk areas, and that starts on page 9 of our report, and that's page 29 of the agenda pack. It starts with management override of controls. There is a comment there that our work is ongoing. That work largely focuses around our work on journals. That work is now complete, so that there are no findings to report in that respect. As are the similar point in relation to presumed risk of forwarding revenue recognition and expenditure recognition. There are no points to report there. We'll just take you to the next page. Our work on level 3 investments. This is an area where we do perform a significant amount of work in relation to the audit. There is one finding, and it relates to in reality, a timing difference between the receipt of capital statements and estimate that management have to make in order to prepare the financial statements. That is not considered a material variance on that estimate at £12.7 million, and that this will be a point within varying value. It would be familiar to committee members and has been reported in previous years. If I could now take you, jump ahead a little bit to page 41 of your pack and page 21 of our report. There are some findings which did come out of the audit. They are low risk findings and best practice linked to IT and work around the Altair system. We do have management responses for each of those items, and we will follow that up throughout the audit year and report on that as part of the audit plan for 24-25. If I could take you to page 23, this is just to tie off some of the points on this slide. That's page 43 of your pack. These relate to a number of misclassification and disclosure changes. We have now checked the final version of the financial updated annual report, and that to be confirmed in the final column. I can confirm that those amendments have been made within the financial statements. So I was going to stop there and open to any questions.
Yes, Simon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Grant and Mary. First of all, I want to congratulate Grant Thornton for actually getting this in on time. I mean, I know we've had a fairly torrid period last 3 years, but we do seem to be, well, not we, you guys seem to be back as with the timing as it should be, which is really, really good news, actually. The second thing is I'd like to congratulate our team who were audited, the auditees, for actually receiving an unqualified report. I mean, that is, you know, it is a significant thing, because if it was qualified, we'd have a welter of problems. So, you know, well done for that, and thank you. I've just got, I think you've covered on page 42, that's in our audit, in our pension pack, the outstanding recommendations. So I did note that some have been carried over from a previous year, and I never like to see that. Are those, I think there's 4 from previous years. Has that been, are you happy that that's been resolved? And my only other point is on page 36, is that there is an objection, and I think we've been through this before, Grant, but what is the objection to the financial statements, and how do we deal with that? Thanks.
I'll respond, and then Mary can correct me if I get it wrong. In terms of prior year recommendation, I think there's only 2. I think what we're saying is we've closed one of them down because one of the ones was basically, I think it went back to 2021, when there was a much bigger difference between the timing and we were saying you need to look at your systems because it's getting close to materiality, picking up on your point. But I think it's now gone back into more routine, not routine, but it's not expected. So we've closed that one down. So that one's gone. The other one I think was in relation to some of those IT issues, and therefore, as we've updated a new report, they've been superseded. So they're in the current recommendations. So we're sort of closing that one down as well. So the only two recommendations I think that are in front of you are the IT ones around Altair. You've had the management responses. A lot of that is around batch processing and elements like that. So I don't think there's anything that we have significant concerns about as the auditors. They're more, as Mary was saying, in terms of best practice. So that's where those are. So there's two that we will follow up in future years. In terms of the objection, I'm concentrating in the public arena. It relates to, and there's a bit of an irony, I suppose, in the way around the system has to work because you object to the main council. I'm not the engagement lead for the main council, but it is on the pension related matter, and it does link into the objection overall is linked into the way that the council it's climate change and how it gets its information really in respect of and how it is handling information based upon what it gets from its, I suppose, experts on the climate change agenda. So that at the moment is currently being assessed by my colleague Abtar. There's a three-stage process. I think probably the pension committee is not that aware of it, but it has been gone through the audit committee. There's stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. And stage 1 is it a valid objection? So you have to write in, and it has to meet certain criteria. Is it related to element in the financial in the financial statements, or are you asking for PIR? Is it related to value for money issues? Then there's stage 2, which is, will we look at it as an objection? So you might write something that is valid, but then there's almost like a public interest test that goes, well, actually, should we be looking at it? And then there's potentially stage 3. We will look at it and we will report upon it. At the moment, I believe it's just passing stage 1. So we're into that stage 2. So as soon as we know a bit more about that, we'll sort of liaise with James on where we are. As in our normal approach to this is, if we do accept it as an objection, we would normally go back to the council stroke fund and say, please, can we have your responses to us on this? And then we will take it from there. And we will not, we're not trying to undertake that work. So it's in progress. So that's what it is.
That's absolutely fine. Because if it's something regarding sort of how we calculate our assets under management or something like that, that would be more serious. But it's not
around how you're measuring around towards net zero and things like that, and that's those sort of elements on that.
Thank you very much. No more. Thanks.
Yes, Brian.
Very quick one, Chairman. I'm unfamiliar with the functional term Altair. First, it's several places in the report, but it comes up first at page 19, para 6. First word is Altair. Application. What is Altair?
That's your pensions administration system, and I may well hand over to Vicky to. It's. I would say it's commonly used amongst a number of pension funds across the country, and it gets slightly more complicated because I think there's something outsourced to Haywood and things like that. But basically, it's your pension administration system where you maintain member reporting.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think it's kind of pinpoints that, but it is the the software is provided to us by Haywood Pensions Technologies, and the name of the software is called Altair. So that's our general pensions administration system that we use.
Thank you. You give a very comprehensive review of pension administration every meeting, but I've never heard you refer to it as Altair before.
No, probably just called it our admin software rather than naming it. So.
I'm very happy with that response.
Any other questions? No. Well, I've just got a question stroke comment. I'm very aware from officers that all the information for the audit is not ready for the beginning of May, and there is a requirement that the audit is completed by the end of July. But the reality is the audit actually only started at the beginning of July, and it puts our team under a lot of pressure. And indeed, the report we've had today, we've referred to it, there are a lot of TBCs to be confirmed. And they have been confirmed, but officers had a very, very short period of time to actually get that sorted out. Indeed, it was a rush to actually get this paper out to us for this meeting because the information has been so late in coming to us. And I'm just pointing out that the audits have been absolutely, opinions have been great, but there's been a lot of tardiness in actually getting the audit done and reported back to us. And there is a point about this. We are actually paying 150% more fees than we were recently. And, you know, we really do feel that next year we want the auditors to be on the front foot and we give us the service that we feel we are paying for. I hope that's not too critical, but that is the reality of how it's seen at this end. But the good news is it's a fantastic audit report. We just want a little bit more it to be done more, you know, more timely and more appropriately, so that it gives our officers time to respond to it rather than just literally a few days. Okay.
So you're recommending that it gets an RA, requires attention.
Yes.
I mean, AJ, I think I've duty bound to respond to that to a certain extent. I think the actual deadline is the end of September now under the new regulations, so it's not the end of July. There are requirements for me as auditor to undertake the audit to a certain quality standard. Those and generally have been ramped up, as I'm sure members are aware, over the years in terms of what we need to look at. The investments that the fund is in are complex. I don't think we have been tardy in that respect. We will be in a position, as I say now, to issue this by the end of September. However, that is dependent upon, I mean, I think in terms of that, we still need to work through the council's audit. I cannot issue the pension fund audit until the council audit is complete. And I'm sure as members are aware, we are working our way back into a more normal routine in terms of getting audits complete. You are picking up on a previous member saying in terms of, I think Grant Thornton is, as you were saying, getting back more into the cycle ahead of many of the other firms. And we are always looking for more efficient, effective ways of doing that. I mean, I think it is to point out if you're an occupational pension scheme, you actually have to end of October to submit your accounts. So I think we are doing every effort to bring it on board, but I don't think the team it is a tight timeline. I accept that, but in terms of the way the public sector works and in terms of where we are, it's unlikely that we'll be able to start much earlier than before July. We have NHS commitments that takes up to mid-June. We always try and do as much work ahead of schedule as we can. We're also waiting for those capital statements to come in. A lot of those don't come in until June in finalisation. So we will make every effort to make the audit more efficient and effective next year. I think this timeline, yes, we accept, you know, we know that it's going to be tight on the AFR, but we will be reporting back to the council's audit committee, who are ultimately those charter of governance. And we, as well as the way, just bringing it all to a circle, we are proposing, I'm not sure it's actually come out, an unqualified audit opinion in respect of the pension fund, and that'll also be reflected in the consistency opinion that goes in the annual report on accounts.
Just one little thing I'd just like to come back on. Of course, all the information is gathered in May with the valuations at May, but if the audit's not done until several months later, those valuations are out of date, and it is quite likely that you as auditors will come back to us and say valuations are out of date. Well, that's no fault of ours. When we supply you with in-date information in May, the audit doesn't start till July. So that is just another thing, please, to consider. I think there isn't any materiality to worry about, but again, it causes a duplication of work for officers here at Shirehall if we're having to revisit valuations.
I think there's a lot on that in terms of, yes, you have to close down your accounts by mid-May on estimates. I accept that. I think some of the more complex investments, i.e. your infrastructure ones and your private equity ones, they actually don't produce their capital statements until June sometime. So I think as auditors, I cannot ignore what's out there. It's a bit like, I think I've said in the past, if in the council audit, if we have an invoice that you make an estimate on and the actual invoice comes in, we have to compare the estimate to the actual. I'm afraid I can't get away from that as an auditor, but we do try and reflect that in the wording here. We don't see it as a reflection on the work your team are doing. You close down, and that's why we look at your estimation process, and that's why we reported in here that actually we also do our own independent price checking, and the estimates come out within. We recognise there'll be differences, because if I go to Bloomberg and I say you go to the Bank of Times, the prices might be slightly different at slightly different times, so very small fluctuations. So we're happy with the estimation process. But if there are actual figures out there, then as auditor, I need to look at those and go, well, actually, I'm sorry, audits in hindsight. I now know that what you didn't know at the time. I just need to say, if you'd known that, would it be at that time you'd have put that in the accounts? Would there have been a material difference that may well have misled someone in the accounts? So that's why we use materiality to say, actually, no, you won't be misled. We're just reporting it now to say there is a difference. It's not material. We're comfortable as auditors that no one will be misled in the financial statements, and they are true and fair. So I think that's a dialogue we can have. We do try and reflect that in the wording. It's just not a reflection upon the team itself.
Okay, well, Pat, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? And we need to continue. We need to continue going through it, don't we? Yes, I think you do. I mean, if you got the report coming up, I suppose just from our side is there will be a letter of representation coming from our side. The draft opinion, I don't think they're in this pack, but the letter of rep will not have anything in it. It will just be that standard letter of representation and saying you're happy not to adjust for the 12.7 million, basically. We've asked not to sign. We normally get to this meeting and it's physically signed, because I hadn't signed till we signed the council audit. Then it's about 2 months down the line and I have to come back here. So we have actually asked, say, well, should we just actually coordinate that with the council audit this year so it all gets signed at the same day, because from auditing standards it's meant to be signed as close to the opinion as possible, so we have to go through us. So those are the two bits that will come to you, but I would suggest that what we do is share it with yourself and Justin, and if there's no issues, if other members are happy, that we just give the final audit findings report, which will be tidied up, and those opinions. If you're happy with that, we will proceed on that basis and then share it with the committee by email. So.
Well, thank you very much. Any other comments? No. Well, in that case, thank you both very much. I'll now ask James Walton, our Executive Director of Resources and Section 151 Officer, to take us through Paper 8, the Pension Fund Annual Accounts for 23-24. Please, James.
Shall we move acceptance of the previous account, Chair?
Well, we'll tie that up at the end. Please. Right. Yeah.
That's fine. Are you talking with it?
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify on that point, it's helpful to have effectively the three papers open while we go through the individual papers. That does allow then, if somebody asks a question, we can go back and revisit the audit findings report or in fact the internal audit report as necessary. So that's why we're just keeping it open until we've gone through all the papers, and then I think the Chair will go back and just confirm those recommendations as necessary. So in terms of agenda item 8, this is the pension fund accounts for 23-24. So the actual accounts are attached there at Appendix A. Appendix B includes the draft opinion from Grant Thornton, which, as has been said, is an unqualified opinion at this point in time. And at Appendix C is a letter of representation, which we send each year and again gets signed following the audit approval, the committee approval. So in terms of the headlines, as has been said, the actual pension fund itself increased in value to just over £2.5 billion. So that was a £259 million increase, which is a significant and substantial increase, possibly one of the biggest in a 12-month period that the fund has seen, which is very pleasing. In terms of the report itself, there are a number of items picked up in terms of item 6, which is on page 50 of the pack around the climate change appraisal, and talks there about the responsible investment, which has been referred to in a number of the public questions that came in earlier. Section 8 is probably the main area that I'll just run through quite a high level. 8.1 confirms the increase in the value. 8.2 refers to the valuations which have been discussed at length in the earlier section. So that just confirms those arrangements and where those particular valuations were and the dates that they were incurred on, which I think is helpful background information. Paragraph 8.3 then just talks about the levels of contributions. So you can see the amount that comes in from the employees and the employers within the scheme. 8.4 then just talks about the scheme membership. So that's now up to 53, just over 53,000 members, which is an increase of 1.8%. 8.5 then just talks about the transfers in and out of the fund. This will vary from one year to another as different employers move into or out of the fund, or employees do as part of that. Overall, we had 6.9 million transfer out and 7.6 transfer in, so that's a slight increase net across those areas. The pensions paid out in 8.6 has increased, and that's now almost at £80 million in a year. And the increase in 8.7 in terms of the management expenses, this was an increase of 2.3 million from the previous year. So 21.1 million pounds of management expenses paid out. That is due in large part to the fact that there's been a successful year in terms of the pension fund growing. So higher returns from the investment managers generally relate then to a higher cost associated with those. So yes, the costs have gone up, but the benefit to the pension fund is significantly in excess of that. As always, the work is done by the team to ensure that the information is there available for the external auditors to review, and that includes an analytical review, which takes through the key areas of variance in 1 year and the next. The annual report itself, as I say, is attached to Appendix A. I don't propose to go through a significant document, but the early sections, the early parts of each section do provide a very good summary of the areas that will be of interest to the public and to the committee in relation to where our investments held, what employers are and the overall position in relation to investment and our approach on investment, including responsible investment. I don't propose to go through any further detail there. If there are any questions, happy to take them. As always, if there are any technical questions, then I'm happy to pass those on to others who will answer them on our behalf. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. Simon.
Yeah, thanks, James. I'd just like to, and you didn't mention it, bring the committee's attention to the fact that we are 100% covered. I mean, I think when we started, Tom, we were maybe in the 70s or certainly in the 90s. I mean, to actually see that this pension fund is 100% covered through its liabilities, particularly after a recent valuation, which is always a difficult time for pension funds, is very encouraging, and it really is good news that the account is actually on page 57 in the back if anybody is interested. The only other question is, I see the employer contributions are up. Is there anything particularly behind that? Have we got more employers, or are we taking more from? I mean, this is all taxpayers' money, to fund an inflation-linked pension fund. So I'd just be grateful for a comment on that.
Through you, Chair. In terms of employee contributions, so it's a set in terms of the bandings, in terms of employer contributions, these are based on the triennial valuations. So when the valuation is undertaken for each individual employer, so while the overall fund, as you say, is around about 100% funded, that can vary with about, I think, 89 employers within the fund. So that can vary by employer. So some, due to their age profile, staffing profile, etc., may be more than fully funded, others may be under. So all of those individual contributions are reviewed where there is a view that in the long term that the level of return, let's say, in terms of the investment fund, is expected to be greater or higher than previously estimated, that can then impact on the level of employers' contributions. So it may well be that due to the profile or the economic environment that's viewed over a long period of time, it's considered that the employers' contributions need to be increased or reduced. That will then be considered by the pension fund and then by each employer on that basis.
So, for the sake of clarity, James, what would be like the average percentage of an employee's salary that an employer contributes? I mean, I think in the private sector the minimum is 3%. What is it in the council pension?
I don't know, would you say that?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so on an average basis, the primary employer contribution increased under the 2022 valuation to 18.4%.
18.4.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, obviously, employee contributions, they vary depending on the scale that you're actually on in terms of what you're earning.
I only ask because some of my, the town and parish councils do query where the money comes from and goes to. So that's it, 18%. Thanks.
I think it's worth saying that we do have some employers who are paying considerably more than 18%, so heading up towards about 30%, aren't we?
Yeah, and that will be based on their kind of membership and risk attached to them. And with regard to employer numbers, we do see an increase in numbers of employers, but that's not necessarily an increase in membership because they're a split off from schools becoming academies, becoming employers in their own right, and also then when they outsource catering and cleaning contracts, the same people but just being split out into separate employers. So you might see that our increase in employers is growing, but actually it's not reflected always in an increase in membership in that sense.
Yes, Brian.
On page 51, paragraph 87, right at the bottom of the page, do the management expenses that we pay for advice we receive include LGPS as well as our own civic advisors?
You'd like to fit that to Justin? Yeah.
Yes, they do. Thanks to the Williams, they include LGPS Central's costs as well as the investment managers and the internal teams costs.
And the internal
Yeah.
team. Oh, wonderful. So it covers literally all expenses.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Well, in that case, we'll take you back to the recommendations. The recommendations on paper 6, they are 3A, performance against the audit plan. We're asked to consider and endorse the performance against the audit plan for the year ended 31st of March 2024, and we're also asked to endorse the Chief Audit Executive's substantial year-end opinion on the fund's internal control environment 23-24. So can I have somebody to...
Well, at the third time of asking.
Yeah, Brian, you're proposing. Excellent. Okay, I'll second all those in favour. Thank you. And then we now move on to James's report, the pension fund annual accounts, and the recommendations here are we're asked to approve the pension fund annual report 23-24 and delegate authority to officers to make any minor changes required. And 3.2, the committee is asked to approve that the chair and executive director of resources sign the letter of representation for Grant Thornton once the audit opinion has been finalised. Can I have a proposal for that, Simon? Seconder? Yep, Roger, all those in favour? Yep, thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 10, pensions administration monitoring, and Vicky Jenks will present that paper, please, Vicky.
So this report just gives you an update on the work of the administration team that we've undertaken, undertaken throughout this year, and then updates for for things since our last committee meeting. It provides you with updates on McLeod, dashboards, annual benefit statement production, pension saving statements, and the review of the regulator new code. I think I won't run through every detail on the report, but just obviously for interest, performance and team update. We are showing to you information about 16 key performance indicators. These are the key tasks that the team work on where they're supplying information to members. And it was just showing you there the number of ones that we are actually achieving 95% of information going out on time. That is just demonstrating that we do have certain KPIs that are not being achieved. And from that, we have been reviewing the resources of the team. And we will be recruiting to build our resilience against some of those key performance indicators and make sure that we're improving the numbers on those. The rest of the report just goes through work of the help desk, the key projects that we have ongoing at the minute. So we have the cloud, which is making sure that the age remedy, age discrimination remedy is applied to those members that are in scope. Dashboard work, we are making sure that we're working with Hayward's Pensions Technologies so that we can connect to the dashboard, and we've just secured our ISP provider. And we have also released pensions benefit statements to all members by the 31st of August. So that information was sent out. There was an issue with 9 statements not being able to be sent out to members. And we have written individually to those to say that we can provide information to them separately if they require it. I think that is it on the. We've also, updated the business plan. It was highlighted that in the business plan we had just got the budgeted figures for spend for 23-24. That has been updated to reflect actual spend. And we're also providing you now with a quarterly update on the key activities of the fund, so that you can see progress on those activities and to show where we're actually completing certain steps that need to be completed by this time of the year. I think that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Apologies, the more observant of you will have noticed that we missed an item out, so we will go back to it. Jean.
Yes, I just wanted to know with the recruitment of 3 full-time pension assistants, how that's going and whether that's being done internally.
So we are looking to start the recruitment towards the end of September. We will be doing both internally and externally adverts. Obviously, with what's currently happening with the council, there may be some opportunity for redeployment, but we will be advertising externally as well. So we've got 2 that we will be advertising for towards the end of September. And then the 3rd post, we just need to agree on the actual how that post is going to work, because it's going to be kind of working across all 3 teams. So we just need to do a bit more planning on who controls that work, and then that will be advertised later on in the year.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, hi. Page 379. It seems that some of the targets, the legally required targets, have been missed by quite some margin. What the bottom one, letters detailing transfer out quote, only 64% have hit the target. That's quite a big mix up. It's not 95%, is it?
No.
And there's several of that. 78%. 71, 76. That I haven't seen that compared to I can't remember to a previous year. Is that normal, or has it got worse? Or
if we compared it to last year, it's slightly worse, and that is due to kind of the resourcing issues that the team have had over the last 18 months. We've had quite a lot of turnover of staff, and we've lost some very experienced members of staff as well. There's also a big area of work volume wise that is sitting at pensions assistant level, and that is the deferred benefit processing and that kind of work. So an aggregation, so where we're combining records, where people keep moving in and out of different posts, but within our fund, that creates quite a lot of work for us. So yes, we've also had obviously the McLeod project to deal with, which has impacted on resources because it does take longer to check through records now. So that's impacted on our ability to kind of keep up with work going out on time. There's also been some information outstanding on how to process transfers in because of McLeod as well. So that's created some of the delays with us not being able to process work on time.
Yeah, it's the word legal target which really hits hard. I mean, whatever the reasons are, and, you know, I know McLeod has been really difficult for you, and you know, staffing is an issue, but that's something management should be on top of at some way, because it is a legal target. And I know there's anything we can do, Chair, or you know, not we personally, but that can be done to assist, or at least from our perspective, can we see will we see an update at the next? Is it we've got another meeting in December? And hope to see. You know, just maybe as an action point in the minutes, we as the pensions committee, we do need to be on top of this. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, it will be brought every quarter, this KPI chart now, and obviously the business case that James and myself recently signed off was to address some of these issues. So hopefully, you know, when we appoint the 3 additional pension assistants, get them in post, this chart will be updated. Hopefully you'll see the improvement towards that 95% target.
Paul. Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I recognise there's obviously been some staffing and resourcing issues that I'm pleased that you're seeking to improve. My apologies. There we go. I just wonder, picking up on the point that was made by a colleague here, I think some either quarter, if you're going to report on it quarterly, some quarter by quarter movement on those targets would be really helpful to give assurance to the committee that we're moving in the right direction. And if there is a previous year total, that would also be helpful to be included. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Good to see the track improving. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other? So in that case, we've got 2 recommendations on agenda item for government of the administration monitoring report, paper 10. We're asked to accept the position as set out in the report, and we're asked to approve the updates to the fund's business plan, which is Appendix C, and note the progress for key activities from the business plan, Appendix D. I'll propose. I'll second. All those in favour? Yep. Thank you. Well, we'll now go back, and I do apologise again, to item 9, which is the corporate governance monitoring report, and I'll hand over to Peter Cheverton. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, so this is just our report on our corporate governance issues, especially around the investment side. It's a standard report to the committee, but just for new members, I'll just point out that the fund invests in pooled investments, so we don't actually have any segregated mandates. That means that effectively those investment managers still have direct ownership of the shares, and that's why we get reports from LGPS Central, we get reports from LGIM, and then on top of that we have reports from Columbia Threadneedle, who act on behalf of the fund as our overlay engagement advisors, and on behalf of LAP, who act across the entire pensions arena for the public sector. So that was just a bit of background to the report. I think what you'll see in terms of the reports that have come through from the actual investment managers, a common theme to what you saw in the public questions. So there's comments within the LGPS Central report on Shell and Glencore. There's comments within the LAP reports on Shell and Glencore. The sort of things that you're getting in the public questions are the sort of things that all of our engagement officers, whether it be through third party like LAP and the investment managers, are all picking up on these issues, and they're all exactly the same issues that are being raised by public questions. We are aware of them and we're trying to actually make progress around those particular things. I mean, I've tried to pull out the ones within the report that may be of interest to you. And if you want me to take you to any of the pages in the actual thing, I can tell you where they are on the agenda, because I'm aware of the fact that there's an awful lot of appendices to this report. So that's roughly in terms of where we are in terms of the voting. I think that the things I'd like to draw probably the committee's attention to, in terms of item 10, the TCFD consultation that was proposed by the previous government. We've still not seen any progress on that. At the moment, we're still reporting what we consider to be the latest information, and we're fully supportive of transparency in this particular area. So obviously, as things do become more enshrined, we will continue that. Then moving on perhaps to item 11. At the last meeting, we did promise there was a call from the previous DLUC under the previous government, which we responded to, and we promised to bring that back and put it into the public arena. So we've included that at Appendix E to this report, and that's on pages 351 to 353. However, since then, there's been quite a lot of change in the public sector environment. So back in August, the government issued its phase 1 pension review, and that was what they was proposing to look at, and that was across 4 different areas. So that was driving scale in relation to direct contribution schemes, which don't really affect to us, tackling fragmentation and inefficiency in the local government pension scheme through collaboration and improved governance, looking at the structure of the pensions ecosystem and value, and finally encouraging investment into UK assets. So of those 4 things that they identified in that first phase review back in August, items 2 and 4 really do impact the LGPS, and item 3, because we're looking at the ecosystem of pensions, has a generic implication to the government pension scheme. Again, since then, because things are moving quite quickly, on the 4th of September, the government actually issued a call for evidence around that, and they based the call for evidence around 3 different areas: scale and consolidation within the local government pension scheme, costs and value, and investments in the UK. And they've given basically all the pension schemes 21 days to respond to them in respect of this. So there's a deadline of the 25th of September. What I'm going to do is just take you through some of the key things that we think we need to include in that response, but then what we're going to ask for is effectively delegated authority to agree the final response with the chair. But some of the things that we think that we need to bring out in that response to government under those issues are that pension funds do invest already on a risk and reward basis, and actually at the moment the thing that's stopping UK investment is more about a lack of supply and opportunities and the incentives actually around investing in the UK. We want to bring out the fact that consolidation of pools may not actually improve the situation. It may actually, in fact, slow things down. It could take time. We'll spend all the resources actually looking to consolidate the pools rather than actually looking to address the issues that the government has come up with. We agree with what the government is proposing, that actually it shouldn't be about costs. We agree that long-term risk returns should be the key drivers. But what we would say is, in terms of when you're looking at pooling and consolidation within pooling, it's not actually been around that long to look at the long-term risk rewards of pooling at this particular moment in time, especially when it comes to things like returns in private markets. I want to re-emphasise that the funds are responsible, and we have a fiduciary duty in terms of our asset allocation, and it's not the responsibility of government to actually determine what we should be investing in. And that's one of the key things we want to get back across. We also want to point out the fact that the UK economy as it is accounts for about 3 to 4% of the world global economy, and as a fund, we've actually got 12% of our fund invested in the UK. So we're already heavily invested in the UK across in terms of our assets. We want to point out the fact that if it comes to investing in the UK, then the investment has to stand on its own 2 feet. But there's more the government can do to actually encourage that. So they can incentivise funds to actually invest in the UK. Now that can be, they can put loss breaks in so that they take the first loss on investments, or they can put tax breaks in to actually increase investment in the UK. So it's not just a case that should the pension fund be doing it, it's a case of what the government can actually do to actually facilitate those investments. And then finally, the point we want to bring across to them is we run this scheme on behalf of the employers and the members within this scheme. And if we make losses, then the employers are the ones that suffer because it's the contribution rates that go up to actually cover those losses. And they can't be underwriting investments in the UK if those investments don't stand on their own 2 feet. So those are the main sort of issues that we're trying to get across in that consultation response. But like I say, we will agree all of that, not only with ourselves, but we'll also talk to our counterparties across LGPS Central in coordinating the response and then agree that with the chair.
I wonder if at this stage I could ask a question rather than come back.
Yeah, push on.
Are there any straws in the wind about the level of consolidation or the amount of consolidation the government is thinking about? Is it thinking of putting together all the funds like the LGPS? I think there are 7 or 8 of them across the country. Are they going to thinking of amalgamating that, or are they even thinking of going so far as effectively taking the individual council's pension funds into some form of consolidating funds, so that we effectively have no further, apart from the administration, we have no further control over the investment? Do we any idea how far the government might be proposing to take this?
I mean, it's difficult to say. The new government, with the previous government, there was talk about value of the actual funds and what the fund or what the pools had in terms of assets under management. So that was potentially looking at potentially taking it down from perhaps the 8 pools that there is at the moment down to potentially 5 pools to get the level of assets under management to a good. I don't think there's been a great deal of change since, as Justin. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just come in a little bit on this, Brian. We've got a bit of a moving target.
Yes, I understand
at the moment. And I think it's fair to say that they really haven't got a clue yet about where they're going to go. You'll have seen Rachel Rees took herself off to Canada to have a look at their system, what have you. Frankly, there's a lot of that which does not apply to the LGPS, and hopefully she'll have learned that while she was there, but who knows. Certainly the talk at the moment is 2 levels. It's fund level, as you alluded to. There have been a couple of effectively fund mergers. One where the councils themselves merged, that was in London. Wandsworth and merged with that. I think it was Richmond, but that was a merger because the councils merged, not per se the funds. And then Northumberland fund was subsumed by Tyne and Weir. So they're the only 2 examples, and those were an absolute devil to actually enact. The legislation there is not helpful in terms of actually physically merging funds as such. So there's a mountain to climb there in terms of making that actually feasible in reality. There's another aspect as well is, are they looking in the wrong direction? Because the logic would be to merge London funds together, a lot of very small funds. There's probably some logical combinations of, say, the Isle of Wight with, say, Hampshire, because the Isle of Wight is one of the tiniest funds in the country. There are a number of other aspects around that. To pooling, however, we've got 8 pools. We've got probably 3 pools which are quite similar in their structure: LGPS, Central, Border, Coast, and Brunel. The others are various different variants of models of how they've gone about pooling, some of which have incurred a lot of central or additional costs because there's another strata, including LGPS Central. So we're bearing the cost of that across the 8 funds. Other pools haven't done it that way, so they've not incurred that cost. So they've got to consider all of that. And does one size really fit all? Which it doesn't in the LGPS. Every fund has done things differently, and hey, what the pools are doing much the same. They're doing things somewhat differently. So they've got to consider all of those things. And as usual, central government politicians love coming out with grand schemes without actually working out in practice how it's going to happen. You know, we had back in 2015, I feel a rat coming on here. You had George Osborne and Brandon Lewis came up with the idea of pooling. They got sort of an idea of a sovereign wealth fund in their heads. What central government politicians don't seem to understand that it is the fund's members' money. It's not theirs. They shouldn't be sticking their snouts in that bucket. And this is something that Roger Phillips, as chair of the Scheme Advisory Board, is very, very keen that the member funds of the LGPS must respond robustly to this, to actually say, this isn't your money. This belongs to our members, and be passionate about it. We're not loud enough in stating what the LGPS is. So, come back to your point, is frankly, it's a mess. There are things at local government level which probably need to be sorted around, sort of, say, mayoral zones and unitary authorities and all that sort of stuff. So that will probably have a bearing on the future shape of the LGPS as well. Because, for example, it would make sense for West Yorkshire Pension Fund to have the West Yorkshire Combined Authority as their administering authority rather than Bradford, for example. So, you know, there are various things like that which actually probably make some sense. But the devil will be in the detail.
Well, thank you for that. I think it gives us all a guidance on the problems the government is going to find. And I'm sure we would all endorse your view that we ought to emphasise that it's the money belongs to individual pensioners and not to the government.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Pete, right across. Not sorry, but
no problem at all.
It amplified what you said.
Yes, it did. So then the next point I'll probably take you to in the report is probably Prime Stewardship Plan. Now, as you'll remember, these are the 10 companies that are the highest emitters within the portfolio. The last time we did the analysis back in November 23. And what we've got now is we've got a new appendix at A2, which is page 271 to 281. And that's been prepared by LGPS Central for us. And that basically just tells us on those particular 10 companies that we've identified as the top 10 emitters, what currently going on in terms of engagement. And you'll see that for most of them, there is engagement. There's on 8 of them, there's engagement within 2024. The 2 where there's no engagement in 2024 are the ones that are actually being identified as aligned to Paris Agreement, and they're comfortable that they are, and their targets and what they're doing are aligned to a 1.5 degree increase in temperature. We're still working at the moment. That update from LGPS Central will be provided on an annual basis. We're still working with them because what we'd actually like to see is we'd like to see that on a more regular than an annual basis. We think it should be provided on a minimum of probably 6 monthly, if not on a quarterly basis, because these 10 companies are effectively what we've identified as the most important ones within terms of actually getting our emission targets down. So again, like I say, this is a start. It's the first time we've seen this report directly linked to a climate stewardship plan, but hopefully, like I say, we will make progress to be able to do that on a more regular basis for you. And then the next thing to bring you to is just the net zero strategy. So obviously we had training back in August, on net zero from LGPS Central. And what we've done now is Appendix F, which is page 355 to 369. We've revised our existing climate strategy. And what we tried to do in there is not rewrite everything. We agreed at the training that the actual aims of the strategy were fine. There was nothing that needed changing there. We still aim to be net zero by 2050. What we actually needed to do was give ourselves some pathways and targets for how the change will be implemented over time in terms of short-term targets. And also, whilst at the moment we concentrate on public market investments, so things like public equities and public bonds, how we're actually going to get the figures into our strategy for things like private markets, so infrastructure, private equity, property, all of those things. So the main changes to the policy are generally around those. It's about what sort of targets are we actually going to have, what sort of pathway do we have to get to net zero by 2050, and what actions are we taking over the next few years in terms of actually getting capital markets and private markets into those figures, so that we got, I think, a full position. We can see exactly what the carbon emissions are for the full fund rather than just the public side of the fund. But like I say, that policy is there for your comments and discussion today.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Any comments, please? Okay. Well, in that case, we'll move to the recommendations for corporate governance policy report. They are recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. We're asked to accept the position as set out in the report in respect to voting and engagement activity, stewardship update at Appendix A, and manager voting reports from LGPS Central at Appendix A1 and A2, legal and general investment management at Appendix B, Columbia Threadneedle Investments Responsible Engagement Overlay Activity Report at Appendix C, and LAPFF Engagement Report at Appendix D. And 2.2, we are asked to review the draft climate change strategy 2024 at Appendix F and approve with or without comment. So can I have a post, please? Simon, I'll second all those in favour. Thank you very much. Well, we'll now move into item 11, the exclusion of press and public. We will vote on a resolution under paragraph 10.2 of the Council's Access to Information Procedure rules that the proceedings of the committee in relation to agenda items 12 to 18 shall not be conducted in public on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the categories specified against them. I propose that. Seconder, all those in favour? Thank you. So Sarah, if you would
just ask for the live stream to end.